move on to our boy here.
All right. I've been waiting the entire show for this. Everyone, settle in. We're going to be talking a lot about this kid. Mason West is unanimously agreed upon by myself and Matthew that if he is available and the Hurricanes do not trade away their 29th overall pick, this is who they get.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. Yeah, so Mason West, I'll start with the profile read here. Beyond his imposing frame of 6'6", and really 6'7", I think. I think he's actually even a little bigger.
And he's only 17. He's got time to grow.
Yeah, I know. So this is, oh boy, it's salivating here. So West is a fluid skater at that size with effortless extension and the reach and skill combination to make high-level plays. A natural shooter. I don't know about that, but EP says it, so I'll go with it. He loads the shots from the hip using upper body torque and frame to generate power. So we can talk about the shot in a little bit, but first, a little bit about this player's background, playing in Adena, Minnesota, high school hockey. That's often been a knock, but I think that you and I both agree that high school is going to be less of an issue going forward with a lot of prospects. We're almost trying to see more of the traditional, I'd say maybe basketball route of going high school to college and then to pro, rather than spending so much time in juniors and then in the AHL. So I actually think that there's a good chance of that here, although he is going to play in the USHL next year for Fargo before he goes to the NCAA. But also, Mason West was recruited as a quarterback, as a football quarterback, and to play D1 football for several different colleges. And he is fully committed to hockey, there was a question about that. That was where his draft stock was wildly, up and down because people weren't certain whether or not he was fully committed to playing hockey as his professional career rather than pursuing football. But now he has officially stated that he is committed to playing ice hockey, and but his skills as a quarterback are very, very evident in what he does on the ice. He is so cerebral. He is so incredibly smart. He is always scanning. His head is up on a swivel all the time on both ends. And on both ends of the ice, offensively and defensively, his head is on a swivel so he can find his teammates and to know and to see what his opponent's going to do and shut it down. He is, I think, has the potential to be elite 200-foot center. It's going to take some time. He's going to need some time in the oven to cook here. Like I said, my development track for him, he's going to play for the USHL in Fargo for one more season. He'll probably need at least 2 years in the NCAA. But after that, I think he could be ready for an NHL team. And by the way, that 1 year after draft, 1 year in the USHL, 2 years in NCAA. Do you know who else? And then in the Hurricanes lineup, do you know who else had that development track?
Off the top of my head, no.
Jackson Blake.
You know what? You're right. I don't know why I didn't think of that. It's late and I've been up since like 5
That's all right. And so I see a very similar development track. Obviously, this is a bit of a different player than Jackson Blake. But, I mean, this is everything that we need as an organization. And we're not sacrificing on the player talent either. So, again, Cullen Potter, Ivan Ryabkin, they may be closer to cracking an NHL lineup. But I think the runway is the term I've been hearing a lot in regard to Mason West. The runway of Mason West is probably longer. That just means room to grow and develop and improve is probably longer for him than anyone else. And he already has you can't teach 6'6". I'm sorry. And the reach that provides you and the cerebral, the brain, the hockey IQ, which he gets from, which a lot of that is the transfer over from his football skills as a quarterback. That is something that no one else in the draft has. And as a similar, although I think he's got even more potential than this player, someone who had a similar development track, though, that I mentioned this before we went live, was Anders Lee. Anders Lee actually played high school football as a quarterback in Minnesota. So there's kind of a lot of eerie similarities here between him and Anders Lee, and just in their own personal backgrounds. But he's a right-handed center. He played wing, I think, at the USHL. He played center in high school. I think he can be center. I mean, at that size, at that kind of at that kind of brain, I think he's easily got the chops to be center in the NHL. And his skating would be above average for the average height player. But the fact that he is that good a skater at his size is very, very rare. And so now the EP, I guess I may have a bit of a disagreement with them there. His shot right now is a little bit of a muffin. I mean, occasionally he fires off a good one, but it's very inconsistent. It needs some work. But I think now that he's fully committed to hockey, I think he's got the time and the ability to work on it. He also needs to learn how to use his frame. I think, like you said, I think he's still growing. I actually think he's still getting used to this frame, which is why I think he needs to learn to use it more. I watched an interview of him where he said, though, that that is something that he was going to work on, and that the coaching staff that he was with in Fargo has already kind of said, how to use your body to create leverage. And so he mentioned that in an interview. So that was already good to see. He knows where he needs to improve. So still draft boards were still a little bit, I guess, sleeping on it, although less and less. I've been as the weeks have gone by, as we approach the draft, especially after he announced he was committed to hockey, he has been climbing. At first, he was around like pick 50 through 70. Now he's around like 35, and where his average is on the draft boards. And I would take him in the first round. I would do it. If Darren York wants to have balls of steel and trade back and still get him, that would be even better. But I wouldn't risk it. If he's available at 29th, I just say, I'll take him. Because his NHL comparable is Tage Thompson. And anyone who's followed me on X or in our group chat, you know how much I love me Tage Thompson. Like, he is the player I want on this team so badly. And I think this guy, the only person I would consider drafting ahead if he's available, which he probably won't. See, there are players that we're not discussing, the kind of premier ones like James Higgins, Anton Frondell, Matthew Schaefer is a defenseman, of course. But another one that's very similar profile here that's maybe slightly more NHL ready is Roger McQueen. I don't know if you've heard that name, but he's projected to go top 10 is Roger McQueen. Especially because after the NHL, he had been hurt last year, which raised some questions, but he performed very well at the combine, which I think has answered all those. Roger McQueen is almost certainly going to go top 10. If he somehow falls and both he and West are available, I guess you could go with McQueen over him, but that's not going to happen. That's extremely unlikely. And honestly, though, Mason West, I actually think Mason West has even a little bit of more of a runway than Roger McQueen does. And because I think he's got a higher hockey IQ. Roger McQueen, he's got a better shot and knows how to use his physical frame better at this point. But I think both of those are definitely can be improved and will improve with Mason West. And it would take some doing, but I think as long as the Hurricanes are patient with him, if they draft him, he will be a top 6 center and possibly number 1. And he will just be everything that this organization could use, and then some.
And there's some Rabkin talk in the chat.
In the chat?
Yeah. It's actually one of my best friends in the whole world right there.
Yeah, I mean, bringing him up again, but I mean, Ryabkin is got all the talent in the world. He's a top 10 talent who has slipped for, frankly, non-ice related reasons. And it depends on how much those bother you. If you're the kind of organization that wants nothing to do with them, then you won't take them. If you're like me and you want to bet on upside no matter what, you'll take it. Honestly, if it was between him and Ryabkin at 29th and they were going to pick one of them, that's pretty close. That is a pretty close pick.
I'd still go with West.
I'd still go with West, but it would be worth considering, though. And maybe praying that other people like just really hate Ryabkin because of the off-ice issues, and that maybe you could trade up in the second round if he's available or something like that to get both West and Ryabkin. That would be
great, and we'd be set up for the future for a while.
Oh yeah. So like I said, I want 2 centers out of this draft, at least 2. And I think a goalie too, maybe.
That's second on the priority list as far as I'm concerned. Is like the Canes are kind of thin at that position with like. When you look at the goalie prospect pool, you're like, okay, we've got a few, but are any of them going to make it? You know, maybe
Kazayev.
Maybe Kazayev.
Nope.
But Yana Perez ain't going to make it.
Nope.
He got absolutely shelled, and it's pretty apparent that he's not going to. That he's an AHL goalie now. Spencer Martin's going overseas to play. Kochetkov, there's a million question marks around him, unfortunately, and I thought that this was going to be the season he really took the step. So I definitely agree with you that goaltending is the priority after centers. So if they come out of this draft with 2 centers, 2 goalies, and then I can care less about everything else.
There's a 6'8" goalie in the draft, by the way.
There is.
Yeah,
he's probably
he plays in the queue. He plays in the queue.
I bet you I've got him on one of the other slides here if you included him in the notes.
I didn't actually.
Okay.
But there is a 6'8". I was looking at it. I was like, he'd be neat. He wouldn't be the first 6'8" goaltender in the NHL. But he's still like having like the mountain that saves, as it were.
Yeah.
Like a small Game of Thrones reference there, but he's 6'8" goaltender.
I've actually never watched that. It's on my broken leg list.
Honestly, and maybe that's a little bit of a controversial take. You don't really need to. I mean, it's the first couple seasons were really great. After that, it tailed off. Frankly.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of shows do that. That's part of the reason I don't get into a ton of TV shows. But back to Mason West here. This guy, ever since you told me about him that one day in the chat, I have actually watched a ton of video on him and did a ton of reading on him. This is the only prospect I'm kind of as informed on as you are. I definitely see, and we can see this with other players that have played multiple sports. For example, Jacob Slavin also played baseball. You can see that hand-eye coordination in his poke checking ability. So
and just the swat pucks out of the air, I don't know how
it's like
no
he's
one else
making
does that.
Yeah, he's like making sacrifice bunts. Yeah, that's what it reminds me of, is like making a bunt. So when you tell me that Mason West, and I see this in his game too, and you quantified it in a way I couldn't figure out how to say, when you're talking about how he uses his football quarterback skills to great effect on the ice, it's kind of the same thing. You're talking, okay, so snap, you get the ball. Okay, my line's collapsing. I got to come out of the pocket, and I got to find someone to throw this ball to and make a play. He does kind of the same thing as a hockey player. Okay, I've made myself time and space. I'm not going to have it forever. Head up, constantly looking around. Bam, it's on somebody else's stick. Totally free and clear, plenty of open ice, makes it himself. So I definitely see that correlation with that playmaking ability with what he learned as a quarterback. I absolutely see that. That is spot on. His skating for his size, I'm not trying to make a direct comparison before anybody gets mad at me, but one of the reasons that Eric Lindros was so coveted, no one had ever seen his size skate that well. That is a big thing now that, like, okay, we're drafting these, or, you have these really big kids coming in and playing now. And a lot of times it's like you associate somebody who's 6'5", 6'6", so on and so forth with not being able to skate, i.e. Matt Rempe. But it seems like the way that they're training these kids to skate now, where it's more about using their core as opposed to being all the way hunched over and in the gorilla poses they called it when I was a kid. That's not happening so much now. It's like you look at the way that Jack Eichel skates, who's a pretty big guy. It's almost like he falls into his stride, and then it looks almost effortless when he transitions into a full stride. I see a lot of similarities in Mason West's skating mechanics. Additionally, I agree with you that the shot velocity with him is there when it comes to Mason West. I think the shot velocity is there, but it needs to improve because he either really gets a hold of it or it's just not a good shot.
Whiffer.
There's no in between. It's like he lets something go at 90 miles an hour, or it's Brett Pesce. There's no So I think
consistency is what he needs in his shot.
Yeah, so he's got the strength. I think it's the mechanics when it comes to the shooting that he has to work
There's
on.
something off in his shooting mechanic that he needs to fix. Some little quirk that he's doing that he's got to fix. Yeah.
One other thing I noticed with it, he shoots really well when he has a lot of time, because I think that's what he's got going on. He's like, okay, I've got time. He takes the time to actually load up the shot. He gets all of it, and he has time to apply what he does do well in his shooting mechanics. It seems to me like when he's under pressure and he has to get a shot away real quick is when the muffins happen. So I think that just comes down to repetition and practice. And like you talked about, he's committed to hockey now, so football is going to be kind of off the table. That's that much more time he can refine the other parts of his game that he needs. defensively, I think he's got a really bright future there too.
Yeah.
So when we're talking the Tage Thompson comparison, I think that is absolutely fair in due time. So everybody, this is me and Matthew's unanimous agreement of who the Hurricanes should draft at 29th overall. If this does happen, be patient. He will probably take longer than the other 4 players we covered. But the payoff with this player, I think, can be ridiculous. If you want a center that could potentially be on the depth chart above Sebastian Aho from this draft, this is him. Just don't expect to see him for, let's see, it's going to be
3 years at
now.
least.
At least 3.
At least 3.
I would say
probably
4. Yeah, I think 4. He's playing in a good program in Fargo. I think after he develops some more, this is one of those kids that I can see really taking the jump, like you were talking about with Jackson Blake, and not having to spend a day in the minors. I could see him doing that.
Yeah, and another thing with playing a year, he's already had I think 10 games in the USHL, where he played very well. So that's the thing that worries a lot of people with the high school, because high school competition is so swingy. It's definitely a lower level. But the fact that he did make the jump to USHL and played well in the 10 games he was there is encouraging. And someone, I don't know if you may remember from last draft, that I think it was our friends at Caniac Report who really want us to take, was Dean Letourneau.
Yeah,
who has had a very similar profile to Mason West in terms of his size and playing center. But he only played high school. There was no one else. There was no other league to look at. And he made the jump right to the NCAA, and it hasn't gone well. So I think that the fact that he will spend another year in Fargo at the USHL before he makes the jump to college hockey, I think is going to do him a world of good. He's going to be able to refine those aspects of this game that he will not, because in NCAA, you kind of have to have some of this down first, because you're not going to have enough time because the season is so short. You're not going to have as much time to fix some mechanical issues. Whereas I think a year in the USHL, he'll have time to fix those problems, and then the sky's the limit. Yes. And I really do think the sky is the limit. He could be Tage Thompson level good. It'll take time. It'll take development resources, but the runway is so long for this player. And often the draft philosophy is, don't draft towards organizational need, just take the best player available. In this case, again, you'll have to invest a lot of development resources into him, but I think you can do both with this.
And one thing we talked about before we got on was how good the Hurricanes development is.
Yes.
And they can afford to take their time with a player like this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's so much runway with Mason West that if he is available at 29th, if I'm Darren York, I'm taking him.
I agree.
I'm not trading back. I'm not rolling the dice there. I am taking him.